Welcome back, Dragonfall. We are... Where are we? I didn't even catch the name of this place when we went in. Der Weinkeller. I think that means wine cellar. Only one person to talk to in here? A young woman stands at the bar, smoking a cigarette. You've seen her face before. Lucky Strike, one of the mercenaries from Monica's files. A plume of blue-gray smoke spills from the corner of her mouth as she turns her attention to you. Hey. The distinctive circuit pattern tattoos that line her face shimmer and pulse with light. You need something? I don't believe that we've met. I'm Alice. Yeah, I know who you are. She takes a drag on her cigarette. How are you holding up, champ? I heard what happened to your boss. She wasn't just my boss. She was a friend. She smirks, then lets the smoke escape from the corner of her mouth. Yeah, well, sorry for your loss and all that. A lot of people are still torn up about it. So you need something, or are you just gonna stand there staring? Why'd you bring up Monica? Did you know her? I met her a couple of times. Seemed nice enough. She takes another drag on her cigarette. But I mostly knew her by reputation. You can't live in this Kiez without her hearing about the Queen of the Kriz Bazaar. She pauses, then slowly lets the smoke escape through her nostrils. Can't say that I was a fan. That's your prerogative, but then you didn't really know her. That's true, but I do have eyes, and I can see what's been happening to the Kriz Bazaar since she got geeked. Whole place is falling apart, isn't it? And why do you think that is? My guess would be that a variety of factors are to blame, but it sounds like you're going to blame it all on Monica. She smirks at you. Ooh, touche. All right. Let's assume that there are a bunch of different things going on. That doesn't change the fact that the illustrious Frau Schaefer made herself into a leader here. And guess what? In an anarchist system, there aren't supposed to be any leaders. Lucky Strike taps out her cigarette and leans towards you, a predatory grin on her face. You and your friends, you followed Monica too. Obeyed her orders without question, right? Not without question. There were debates. And at the end of those debates, Monica would put her foot down, and you'd wind up doing whatever she said, right? She smirks at you. Don't bother answering. It was a rhetorical question. For such a rabid anarchist, your friend seemed awfully comfortable being in power. Kind of a contradiction in terms, don't you think? Okay, so this is interesting as a thematic element. So I talked a little bit about this before in terms of like the idea of this being an anarchist like city state or whatever. And, you know, I don't want to turn this into like some big like long thing on political philosophy. But anarchism and the history of like political anarchism in, you know, the last 200 years or so is fascinating and complicated. It's especially interesting in the context of a cyberpunk setting. Cyberpunk as a setting, which this very much is very often, almost universally really, defined by a sort of post-state, highly corporatized government and state structure. You can see this in other things, like, you know, I'm just trying to think of like common video games. Obviously, the Deus Ex series is a good example. I haven't played Cyberpunk, but I assume, well, part of the reason I haven't played Cyberpunk is it seems to be mostly just reskinned GTA, not very cyberpunk at all. But anyway, I digress. My point here is that by definition, having a cyberpunk setting sort of means a corporate anarchist state. So even in those settings, usually if there is a governmental system, it's typically shown to be dysfunctional, or the balance of power between the government system and the like political authority, or well, the government may not be the political authority, and that like corporate structures and like late stage like super capitalist legislation or lack thereof has made multinational corporations into basically autonomous like nebulous states of their own, with like the sort of ultimate culmination of the idea of like privatized property and like so-called freedom from government influence. But that makes this particular setting all the more interesting because this is an anarchist state within an anarcho-capitalist world, basically. Whether it's, the Telestrians, who we saw in the last game, or whoever else, like, they basically run as all-powerful, groups that are almost beyond the reach of any government system. Likewise, you see it with like the police being privatized with Lone Star and those sorts of things. And so talking about the Cruz Bazaar as I'm a little bit lost in terms of what the size and scope of this state is, but it's beyond the Cruz Bazaar. This area, the Berlin area, being like so stoutly anarchist is kind of a contradiction in terms, because it seems to be more about the shirking of the corporate influence than it is about the anarchist element. And Lucky Strike here is making I don't want to say it's a bad point, but it's exactly the kind of thing that would be argued by somebody who doesn't understand what anarchism is about, or only has a very idealized vision of what political anarchism is theoretically, in the history of political philosophy, supposed to represent. So anarchism is not about having no rulers, no laws, and nobody in power. It's an ideal, like, political anarchism is really mostly about trying to establish a balance of powers between all people, I guess, in equal, everybody has equal amounts to gain and equal amounts to lose, and cooperation is the name of the game. It's a very idealistic viewpoint that, it doesn't really work out, as most political systems don't really work out. But her statements here of like, oh, you had a master, therefore you're not really into it, is like so like freshman philosophy, platitudes about like shirking power structures and all that shit. It's very, like, I don't think she's even making it in bad faith. I think she's just genuinely doesn't get it. But at the same time, I mean, that is like one of the ultimate failings of a theoretical anarchist state, is that since there's no structure, like the lack of structure means that no one will ever agree on what the lack of structure is supposed to be about. It's very circular and kind of silly. But anyway, I've rambled enough on that for a few minutes. We'll come back to it at some point, I'm sure. I'll have to break out my books again. All right. Anyway, what were we doing? For such a rabid anarchist, your friend seemed awfully comfortable being in power. Kind of a contradiction in terms, don't you think? Let's see. I wish there was one in between. Because I want to say no, I don't, but this seems aggressive. No, I don't, and I don't think you knew a damn thing about who Monica really was. She shrugs. Fair enough, you're probably right. I didn't know her like you. I'm sure that she was a lovely person. All I really know is that your friend's death left a power vacuum, and the Kriz Bazaar is less stable because of it. Well, I can't tell if you're trying to advocate for anarchism or advocate against anarchism, because it sounds to me like you're saying somebody needs to be in power. I don't know. Like, make up your mind. That's all that's in here? I'm surprised. Man, this place is freaking dingy, though. See, that's another thing I've never quite understood about a lot of cyberpunk settings is just how grimy they are. I mean, a lot of it is just for the sake of tone, right? But whether it's a cyberpunk setting or a post-apocalyptic setting like Fallout or something like that, like often there's just like everybody's sort of okay with a level of grime that doesn't quite make sense. Like, I'm not saying you're gonna clean up the whole world, right? But there's a level that's just like neglect, like deliberate neglect that could easily be remedied. Like walking through Fallout, like any of the Fallout games from Fallout 1, 2, 3, New Vegas, like all of them have a similar sort of problem, although some of them are worse than others in terms of like you walk through and it's like, did this just, like, people are living in this building, so why is there just construction debris all over like the apocalypse happened yesterday, you know? Sometimes it's lack of resources and poverty and some stuff, and sometimes it's just like you couldn't bother to sweep. You couldn't, like, nobody's been manufacturing like soap or something. I don't know. Like the amount of, like, this floor is torn up and there's this, I mean, this hole in the wall is kind of fine, I guess. But there's like these walls are, I don't know. Like every there's stains on the floor. I know it's supposed to be a grimy place, but like it's just excessively dingy. And maybe people are like too depressed to make an effort, but I don't know. That only goes so far. You can't tell me that the whole world is just covered in grime and nobody's gotten a mop. All right. Well, that's enough of that for now. Hold on. Were we picked something up. Did I need to come back here? No. Okay. All right. I think we just better go back to the safe house. Alright, Blitz, what's up? Blitz looks up at your approach. The table beside him is littered with cigarette butts, and a data check cable dangles from a portable terminal set up by his side. Hey, Chief. You need something? Just checking in. You doing alright? His smile widens. Great, Chief. I'm doing just great. It's real nice to be able to wind down and relax for a change. No more worrying about this ganger or that ganger sneaking behind me and slipping a knife between my ribs. He slaps the table with a grin. It's a good change, Chief, I gotta say. Glad to hear it. We're happy to have you on the team. Of course you are. He gestures at himself with a flourish. What's not to be happy about? Now that you're all settled in, I've got some questions for you. Blitz glances wistfully back at the terminal on the table, then turns back with a sigh of resignation. I suppose, but try and keep it short, okay, Chief? I've got things to do. How long were you in Dragonfall? I ended up there after the anarchist revolution of 39. I was just a kid back then, too young to realize how good I was, how much money I could have made working in the shadows. He shakes his head, a wistful expression on his face. And so, being young and dumb, I fell in with the gang crowd, and that was that. Well, this feels very accusatory, but seeing as it's the only way forward in this thing, I guess I'll say it. You're a member of a drug gang. Why should I trust you? Why wouldn't you, Chief? I mean, just look at me. He does his best to give you a winning smile. I'm a trustworthy guy. Prove it. Tell me about the gang you ran with. Well, I don't know all that much, Chief. I wasn't a member of gang leadership or anything. I'm not really sure why you care, either. Consider it a test. I need to know where your loyalties lie. He rolls his eyes. If that's what it'll take you to trust me, fine. Anything for you, Chief. Well, where to begin? When I first arrived at Dragonfall, I spent some time taking in the lay of the land. The Schwarzherzen were still a pretty small gang, strictly street level, but I could see they were going places. I did a little pro bono decking for their leader, a fat little dwarf named Dieter. Soon enough, I was part of the family. For a drug gang, the Schwarzherzen were decent enough folks. I made a lot of money with them, helped them take the hotel in the first place. We had a lot of good years there. Then Dieter was killed in a firefight, and our happy little family fell apart. Was that when the hotel got attacked? Blitz takes a deep breath, shifts his weight from one foot to another. Not exactly. The Schwarzherzen maintained their hold on Dragonfall, but the change of leadership was bad news for me. After Dieter kicked the bucket, his second-in-command took over. She was a real piece of work, called herself Leonie Luster. She had a vicious streak a mile long, and she was none too fond of me. I can't imagine why not. I know, what's not to like? Maybe she felt threatened by my friendship with Dieter, back before he ate that bullet. Or maybe she was just jealous of my rugged good looks. Who the hell knows? Maybe it's your arrogance, buddy. The point is, she went after me, vigorously. Within 24 hours of Dieter's death, I had a price on my head, and then the hotel got taken over. Wow, that's a tight timeline. So that's what you need to know about the Schwarzherzen. They were a great gang, a powerful gang. It helped to make them that way. Then they had a management turnover and everything went to hell. Oh, look at that. It's just like a corporation. Oopsie. We made corporations again. Blitz rocks back on his feet, his hands in his pockets. That's it. End of story. Anything else you want to talk about? Wait a second, that isn't it. There are some pretty big holes in that story. Come on, Chief, this is all ancient history. Wouldn't you rather talk about the future? The runs we're going to go on, the money we're going to make. Blitz, tell me what happened between Luster putting the price on your head and the hotel getting attacked. Alright, Chief, fine. If that's what it'll take to make you happy. So I was in a bind, right? The members of the Schwarzherzen who were loyal to Luster were all out for my blood, and none of the others were going to stick their necks out for me. The advantage of being a ganger is protection in numbers. When those numbers turn against you, you've got to get creative if you want to stay alive. What did you do? Blitz taps the plastic of his data jack. What I had to. Luster had declared war on me, so I retaliated, and I won. All without ever firing a shot. So you tipped off the other gang? That's not an answer. Blitz sighs. You won't be satisfied until I spell it out, will you? Okay, fine. I hacked into Luster's computer and sent all of her information to a rival organization. Remember Frank from the hotel? He was my liaison. They hit the Schwarzerhausen and they hit him hard. And they took the hotel. And then they took me. I admit the plan backfired a little. I don't really like either of these options. This one sounds too congratulatory, and this one sounds too accusatory. I guess I'm more on this end of things. You did what you had to do. In your place, I'd probably have done the same. Blitz lets out a sigh of relief. Thanks, Chief. I knew you'd understand. Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to get back to what I was doing. He gives you a lazy salute. We'll talk later, I'm sure. And Chief, I'm glad to be a member of the team. Alright, well. Good to have those details. It does feel a little bit silly that they're potentially so easily missable, but anyway. Alright, gonna cut the episode here. We'll talk to the rest of the party and follow up on next elements, the discussing your findings on the next episode. See you guys then.